All right, everyone, let's get the show started. Welcome to our DevOps office hours. It's August 26th, 2020. My name is Eric Osterman, and I'll be leading the conversation. I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse. We're a DevOps accelerator. That means that we help companies own their infrastructure in record time by building it together with your team and then showing them the ropes. If that sounds interesting, head over to cloudposse.com/quiz to get started. Again, that's cloudposse.com/quiz to get started. For those of you new to the call, the format is very informal. My goal is to get your questions answered. So feel free to unmute yourself at any time if you want to jump in and participate. If you're tuning in from our podcast or YouTube channel, you can register for these live and interactive sessions by going to cloudposse.com/office hours. Again, that's cloudposse.com/office hours. We host these calls every week. We'll automatically post a video recording of this session to the Office Hours channel, as well as follow up with an email so that you can share it with your team. So with that said, let's go ahead and kick it off for today. So just a couple of quick announcements before we get to the questions. Andre shared in the office hours last week that the KubeCon, Cloud Native Con sessions should be available on YouTube starting in early December. So if you missed it, you can catch up on that. Another cool little fact is that Lens, so for those of you using Kubernetes, if you haven't seen Lens before, it's a cool little IDE for working with it. Almost like a REPL for Kubernetes, you could say. It's great for local development. It's great for using with Minikube. I'm less jazzed about using it for managing your production infrastructure, but hey, if it floats your boat, go ahead. So Lens was started by another company. I forget the name of the company. Unfortunately, they were not able to survive, and they ended up closing down and open sourced Lens under a new organization called LensApp. And then just last week, I believe, or possibly, yeah, it was last week, Mirantis acquired part of the IP for Docker and Docker Hub and Docker Cloud and all that stuff. So Mirantis also now bought up Lens, and I'm guessing they are trying to put together a more compelling offering around Docker and Kubernetes. Anybody on the call use Lens?
They're from Cantina. The company name is Cantina. They're from Finland.
Ah, okay, the original company. Okay, yeah. It sounds like you might be from Finland, or
Nope.
no? Okay, I just heard an accent there. I went out on a limb and fell off. All right, cool. Another awesome thing that was brought to my attention. Apparently, this guy's been doing cool stuff for some time. I only this week heard about him. So this is Mayasuke Morita, and this guy has a lot of slick little one-off purpose-built tools working with Terraform. The two that really jump out to me would be TF Update and HCL Edit. So HCL Edit is an HCL2 aware tool, kind of like using JQ or YQ for manipulating JSON or YAML. Well, HCL Edit lets you manipulate Terraform code, and it does it in a way that also preserves the comments, which I think is really important because we use comments a lot in our HCL code. So ways you might want to do this is if you're refactoring your code and you want to rewrite some references, this would be maybe the tool to help you do that. So before we as soon as I saw it, okay, cool, we can use this then to start rewriting Terraform module versions and core versions for pinning. Well, looks like we don't even need to do that because he has another tool that is designed for helping bump the versions for modules, providers, and Terraform core version constraints. So haven't yet had a chance to kick the tires on it, but we are working at Cloud Posse right now on a strategy for incorporating microplane. I think think it was called Microplane. Yeah, Microplane, which is a tool that lets us kind of run migrations across all of our hundreds of repositories in an automated fashion. So we're coming up with a strategy. We can use this with like TF Update and a whole bunch of other things that we need to do, because managing 100 repos it's a world of hurt, I can tell you. Any personal experience using HCL Edit or TF Edit? Anyone on the call? Cool. Does this solve any problems for anyone else? Because I was really excited to see this tool. All right. So the other bit of news, this affects mostly us and some of our customers, because we've been using the Gatekeeper project. Gatekeeper was a small OAuth 2 type of proxy for working with Keycloak. So Keycloak is an IDP. And unfortunately, so what happened is, so Gatekeeper was spun off into its own organization, kind of like Lens was spun off into its own organization. And shortly thereafter, that new organization was called Luketo. And then shortly thereafter, they announced that they're actually sunsetting it. So they recommend using the Bitly OAuth 2 proxy. For those of you who've been doing this for the last few years, you might recall that the Bitly OAuth 2 proxy itself was sunset, and then it was picked up by another organization called Pusher, and then Pusher has now pushed it off into its own organization called the OAuth 2 proxy, and I'm just waiting to see a sunset notice on this as well. No. Has anybody been using OAuth 2 proxy after it's been relocated to its own separate organization? How's maintenance been going? Looking at the pull request activity, it looks pretty active, so that's good. I'm concerned though that there's still 22 pull requests open, and that it might be falling behind. Going back for about a month here. I'm curious, for my own sake, is anybody using Pomerium as their like BeyondCorp style zero trust proxy? No takers on that one, huh? No one using Pomerium? All right. Moving on. So one thing I'm really confused and scratching my head. It's funny, if you go to like news or you're in some Slack teams, you're going to see all these announcements for Kubernetes 1.19 getting released. And okay, tad later than usual. I know. So I don't get it, because I see all these announcements about it being released. I see that on the release calendar that it's supposed to be released. But if you go to the Kubernetes organization for Kubernetes and look at the releases for 10 minutes ago. All right, that hasn't happened before. All right, because I was just going through these releases here, and the last one was a release candidate 4. So literally 10 minutes ago, after I was preparing my notes, 1.19 dropped. So there you have it. You heard it here first. Anybody already kicked the tires on 1.19? Okay. Well, that's it for announcements that I had. Anybody else have some cool announcements, tools that they've come across this week that they're using, new releases, deprecations, sunset notices, anything like that?
This is Sheldon.
Hey, Sheldon.
I wanted to ask about I saw an announcement regarding the Docker public registry and new limits for that. So I wanted to mention that because it's pretty impactful, I think, to a lot of folks that are just using public images without, keeping private copies of it.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up again. I totally spaced and wanted to bring that up. So, for those who haven't been following along, related to the acquisition of Mirantis, not of Mirantis, but of Docker by Mirantis, we're talking like Docker Hub and Docker Cloud and some other pieces of it. They've now decided to roll out some rate limits on the Docker Hub service. Based on their assessment, it's going to help them free up something like, what is it, like either 1/5 or 25% of the images out there are orphaned. So one of the things they're going to be doing is just blowing away a bunch of unused images. The other is that they're going to start rate limiting anonymous pulls. So if you're deploying a lot of open source from upstream registries that are probably on Docker Hub, then this might affect you. So based on their assessment, the impact should be relatively low. I can only imagine that they're trying to right the ship here and make this a profitable business for them. All these security scanning tools, pulling down every image several times a day, all these Kubernetes clusters and ECS clusters that have a pull policy of pull always are probably part of the reason why this is a reality that they got to do. But if you're relying on upstream images, you might want to consider using a pull-through cache or proxy of some sort, or switching registries, or replicating the images you depend on to ECR, which would probably be our recommendation to our customers. Any other recommendations here?
I wanted to mention the main thing that this was concerning about was if you were using, say, a proxy service. This was something that was mentioned in one of the blog posts that I didn't originally think about it. I'm not pulling that many, but if your organization has a common, say, IP address, and you have, say, distributed teams, the NAT gateway, then that limit could be easily hit if you have a lot of different processes going on, and it would be invisible to you at that point. So worth considering.
Yeah, really good point. So they're doing IP-based rate limiting on this. That's how an anonymous user is calculated. Sorry for the fire engineer. So one of the best practices with that is having like an elastic IP associated with the NAT gateways. And even if you didn't have an elastic IP, you're still going to have relatively static IPs. So if you have 100 servers behind that, you're going to hit that rate limit in a second. Anybody already taken steps to mitigate this? I know a lot of folks on the regulars on this call have been using Quay, and Quay has had some stability issues, totally unrelated to this rate limiting. But because of that, people have sought out alternatives. I think this is going to be another kind of situation like that. A lot of hard lessons going to be learned. All right, so that's that. Let's get into some questions then. There were a few questions that came up last week that we didn't get to. I felt bad about that, so I just want to quickly bring these up right now. See if anybody has some recommendations on how we can do this. I'm going to open these tabs up. So the first one is from Vlad. Vlad, are you on the call today? I guess he didn't make it today. He's been a regular. So Vlad was asking if anyone's gotten better alternative when using ECS Fargate for how to pass configuration files other than using a sidecar container that reads a base64 value and writes it to a file. Anybody have recommendations for this? We're not using ECS with config files like this, so it's not a problem.
Is it possible to use SSM parameter store and not have the configuration be local to that container at all?
Right. I think my guess is that the end result is he has an application that needs to consume that file. And if we're talking Kubernetes, right, it's really easy to mount a secret or a config as a file to the container. But I don't believe that concept exists with ECS.
Yeah, we're using ECS. Hi, Ian, by the way, new first-time caller. Yeah, we're using ECS, and the way we handle it is with SSM parameters, and this part of the application bootstrapping code is to pull those parameters down from SSM.
Yeah. Are you doing this as part of your application or your entry point script?
Application on
Okay.
for these two.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I think ultimately the best or most seamless experience would be, like you said, just modify the application. There was a great utility for this back in the day, but it's been deprecated. It was by Kelsey Hightower himself, I think before his glory days, called confd. So this is one option that can help you write those config files, and you could use it as an entry point. He has, I believe, let's see here. Yeah, exactly. There's been no updates to this because it's been sunset. So the other option, which almost replaces it for what you need, is to use Gauntlet. And Gauntlet will support writing config files for you. And Gauntlet can source SSM directly. Gauntlet supports a number of backends. I forget all of the ones that it supports, but this would be kind of like if you're asking for an advice on a tool you could use, well, here's the tool you could use. If you're asking for a way to do it natively in ECS, yeah, it looks like we don't have a better answer for you. All right, let's see. The next question here was, what's the right way to make AMIs for use with Terraform? And this is my paraphrasing, actually, of the question. So Sahil was asking, he has a workflow with a slight loophole. And what he has is in Terraform a script that he uses to provision a server. And they then take a AMI snapshot of that server. The AMI is subsequently used by auto-scaling groups, and after that, he doesn't need that server that he used to provision initially. So if he force removes it manually after creating it, well, then whenever he runs Terraform apply, it's going to automatically re-provision that server, and he doesn't want to do that. So I think the standard answer you'll get from most people here would be, well, that's not the right use case for Terraform in this situation, and you're probably going to want to use the other HashiCorp product, which is called Packer. And Packer has a very simple DSL, two forms of that DSL, by the way, and the DSL lets you describe how everything that needs to happen on that server when it boots up. Then it orchestrates the snapshot of that and can even help you distribute that to other regions and stuff like that. Things to note about Packer is that the latest versions are support, or I don't think it's GA yet, but Packer does support HCL2 now. So you don't have to write your configurations in JSON. Yeah, that the workflow should be decoupled here, that basically your pipelines, when you make changes to the Packer configuration, you're going to want to kick off your continuous delivery for that to build the AMI and ship it to your to the AWS account that you need that in. And then separately, you're going to want to reference that AMI in your Terraform by using data lookups. So like the Terraform data provider for an AMI. Then you'll probably want to have some mechanism for looking up the AMI automatically in your Terraform code, like this.
Eric?
Yeah.
This is Sheldon. One thing that I did based on some recommendations in how I think AWS does it is, instead of referencing an AMI directly, instead for CloudFormation and Terraform, you point to an SSM parameter that references the AMI ID, And at that point, you're able to roll backwards if you need to, and everybody just points to, the SSM parameter that says latest version.
Yeah, that's a really good tip as well. I like that one. And you're saying Packer, I don't know off the top of my head, but you're saying Packer can actually write the latest AMI built directly to SSM, or that's something you do in your pipeline?
I added a Terraform Cloud workspace, and that just triggers that I just trigger, and that keeps it up to date. Okay. The artifact parsing is just a quick disclaimer, is a bit of a pain. Packer will generate artifacts in a single JSON file, and you end up having to parse it over and over if you have a common workspace that's cached. So it's much easier to use like a ephemeral workspace in the cloud, generate your AMI, and not like preserve any local artifacts, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's cool. Do you have any, I think you do some open source, Sheldon, right? Do you have any examples on your GitHub for this?
I don't. This is more organizations specific. I did want to mention as well from like the comments that there is, for somebody that's brand new, it might also be worth looking at EC2 Image Builder if you don't have heavy requirements. It's in the PowerShell community. There's a team member there that's been basically, they've been iterating very quickly on it, adding a lot of functionality. I prefer Packer because I already put that work in. I have pester tests and all of those pieces already in place. But if you aren't in that place, it would potentially simplify a lot of the connectivity issues that you can run into when you run Packer. So take a look at that.
That's cool. I'll post a link in the channel for that one. I wasn't aware of that. Let me get back to my workspace here. So that reminds me that I'd seen somebody else who'd also created a Lambda to implement something like a Packer workflow for building AMIs. I don't know if that was this one then. How is this one invoked?
This is a service that runs. Okay. I would wager that a Lambda would be a very poor substitute, primarily because I believe the maximum time is 15 minutes. Yeah. And some Packer images can run longer than that. Yeah. The solution that is also available that some people have used is the AWS SSM automation docs. And there are workflows in there that you can replicate most of the Packer type functionality, spinning up instances and keeping it very simple. It just doesn't have the same, test automation workflow and reporting that you might get from, one of the like tools like Jenkins, Azure Pipelines, or equivalent.
That's cool. Can you pull up any of those links while you're at it, just so we can share that in the channel?
Sure.
Be some context. Cool. Thanks for adding that, Sheldon. I appreciate it. All right. Next one was a question asked by RB. I think RB has actually helped solve his own problem and got some help from Pepe in the community, but might as well bring it up as well because it can benefit others. So RB was ran into this limit with their security group for I don't know, maybe it was like their Bastion server. Yeah. So basically, they have a VPC. They have some resources in there. They have an office security group where they've been adding individuals, /32-siders probably for IP addresses. And well, when you hit 60, then you find out you can't add 61. So how do you avoid this problem? How have you avoided it for kind of like work from remote situations? Any recommendations here that somebody would like to add for how you've solved it or why you don't have the problem? So the most common workaround, of course, is that you deploy a VPN. And the VPN is public. You don't lock down the CIDRs for the VPN itself. We haven't used Amazon's VPN service. I know at least it was the case you couldn't very easily Terraform that. Has that changed by any chance? Does anyone know if you can now easily Terraform AWS's VPN service? It's basically OpenVPN under the hood.
I don't know if it's easy. We did have somebody at our office take a stab at it, and I think just the level of effort. They ended up stopping, but I think they were able to get pretty far with it.
Gotcha. So, but you didn't end up running with it. You ended up sticking with the ClickOps for the VPN.
Yeah, actually not even with the ClickOps. It was just it just stopped not due to Terraform limitation, but he just kind of ran out of time and interest.
Okay, that makes sense. So what we've been using is a tool called Pre-Tunnel. We deploy it under Kubernetes. Pre-Tunnel is pretty rad because unlike all the VPN solutions out there, this is the only one that has like totally palatable pricing. Their enterprise license is $600 a year. So that's quite affordable when you're looking at VPN software. And it supports single sign-on. You can integrate it with G Suite. You can integrate it with Okta. It supports HA, so you can run, for example, if you deploy this in Kubernetes, you can have multiple pre-tunnel pods in your cluster with Anti-Affinity, so they're across multiple nodes and multiple AZs. So you have a pretty highly available VPN solution, and it's a very modern UI that looks nice to the eye and is pretty easy to use. They also have the free open source version, which will get you a far way, but it does not have the single sign-on and it doesn't have the built-in HA. Of course, if you're running under Kubernetes, you'll have some fault tolerance so that it'll get respun up on a new server. But some of the more advanced things you might want to do are not available. Other cool things about Pre-Tunnel is that you get the site-to-site VPN. So if you want to peer multiple locations in a way which goes around maybe Transit Gateway or some of those other things, you can do that with this Pre-Tunnel tool. So Pre-Tunnel solves this problem by requiring TLS-based authentication to the service, and then once you have access to that Pre-Tunnel, you can control within Pre-Tunnel what internal resources that VPN server pool can access. So you're getting away from limits of EC2 and security groups to what you can do with Pre-Tunnel, which under the hood is just using IP tables, and you're not going to have those same limits.
Yeah, this is Sheldon one more time in case nobody saw it in the chat. We ran into that problem, and I'm not saying this is the best solution, but for us, one of the solutions was that AWS limits will allow you with a conversation. I believe you can change the limit by removing the count of, say, egress rules available and adding more ingress rules. It's a juggling act on totals.
Oh, okay.
So for us, that was a temporary solution that was, possible just to add more to a rule, since we don't use perhaps ingress rules extensively while we do a lot of ingress rules.
That makes sense. So it's a trade-off.
Yeah, it's a trade-off,
Yeah,
definitely.
you can do. Cool. Good tip. Anyone else have something to add to this? And just another note, ideally one should just move to this model where those services that you need to expose are just exposed via an identity-aware proxy. And identity-aware proxies are like a point-to-point tunnel, you could think of it that way, between a service and the user, and protected by single sign-on, something like your Okta or G Suite. And then Okta and G Suite enforces that the users coming from a trusted location, that their session hasn't expired, and all those other things, rather than using CIDR rules to grant access. And this is part of the Beyond Corp concept of security. Beyond Corp is a term Google coined, but there's been a whole industry that's spun up around Beyond Corp, including a company called BeyondCorp.com. I believe they were acquired. So look up Beyond Corp as a better strategy for how to do remote access and get away from using CIDRs altogether. So those were the 3 talking points I had prepared from past questions. I'm going to go jump into Slack here and let's see if there's been any new questions here. If we have time, I want a 101 of your future Go-based task project management framework that you're working on as a teaser. Yes, totally. I will do that right now. So how do let me collect my thoughts here so I can do this in a concerted manner. So what Sheldon is referring to is that there was an announcement made earlier this week in the Terraform channel of another kind of framework here for Terraform. So let's look here. I'm going to scroll up a little bit and see if I can find quickly. Yeah, so this Terraspace.cloud. So this is by a company, forget here what the company was called, BoltOps. So BoltOps, they have a bunch of cool little utilities, Jack, Sonic, UFO, Lano, Jets, Cubes, and they have like they're positioned almost as a TerraGrunt alternative. So if you, or a GruntWorks alternative. So if you look at their support, you can subscribe to a subscription of like Terraform code and stuff like that. Anyways, they have this thing called Terraspace, and Terraspace is a opinionated way of doing Terraform. You lay out your projects like this, and you have modules and stacks, and you have your, to keep things dry, you have your a Terraform directory with the reusable Terraform files, and it has a pretty clean CLI UI here where you can run Terraspace new module, and it creates a new project or module for you, and the standard commands like this. And on the surface, yeah, this is kind of nice. I like what I see. We haven't used it, or I'm not necessarily recommending it. Which gets us to the next point here, is that Terraspace is in Ruby, and as much as I have a soft spot for Ruby in my heart, I wouldn't want to build a product that I want to get a lot of people to adopt these days on it, because when you install Ruby, you also install the kitchen sink. And I'm going to have the same problem actually with Python. I'm sorry. I really like my CLI tools nowadays to be very easily installed, a single binary that does everything. So the other problem that I have with like Terraspace, and then there's TerraGrunt, is that these are very Terraform specific tools. And if your organization only does TerraGrunt, and your organization doesn't really rely on a lot of other tools, then yeah, I guess you can get away with it. But the other problem with like TerraGrunt and this Terraspace is I think that they aren't working within the spirit of Terraform, and we can see that in the fact that they don't work directly with Terraform Cloud. And I have seen like posts that show how to run TerraGrunt with Terraform Cloud. Yes, I agree that you can have remote runs with TerraGrunt and run those on Terraform Cloud. But all the dryness of what you're doing with TerraGrunt is still not going to work if you're using Terraform Cloud. You're going to have to come up with a different workflow. So these are just common problems in general with using wrappers like this. And what I'm going to share is not necessarily alleviating all of these pain points and introduces new ones. But one of the open source developers out there that I follow very closely and does amazing things is this guy, Yusuke, GitHub handle Mumoshu. He has a project called Variant. So there was the original Variant, which was like his MVP of how to do this. And he's maintained this for years, and we've used it. But he's come up with a whole new approach to this as he's learned and grown as a developer that's really amazing. And what he's developed is a DSL for describing workflows. And you can create any workflow you want using this. It is all based on HCL2. So it's familiar if you're already using TerraGrunt. And it's opinionated in the sense that it's not a full-blown language, but it supports the full interpolation language of Terraform. So any interpolations you can do in Terraform, you can do in this. But it also adds a few more low-level constructs to make things easier. Things like doing loading configurations. Let's see, where do I go? So what it is I like to call it a universal client tool. Another summary of this is like, turn your bash scripts into a modern single executable CLI today. That's how he labels it. And how this is different from shell scripting, how this is different from Python and TerraGrunt and Terraspace is that this is just a DSL for how to express how to do workflows. And then you can create your workflows for this. Like you can create your own workflows for Helm. You can create your own workflows for Terraform. You can create your own workflows for Helm file, which is what we use, or kubectl. You can then bundle those workflows as a variant module. You can stick those on GitHub, and then you can tell Variant to import them. And I don't know if there's an example here, but here's a basic example. It's actually slightly out of date, but this here can import things in your local directory, but it can also use a Git URL. So you can specify a remote module. So now with Variant, you can create variants, which are hosted on GitHub, which are your own workflows for how to do things. They can be shared, they can be versioned, they can be version pinned. And Cloud Posse is working on a library for this that we're going to open source. We have it today, we're just working through some kinks, and it's going to be open sourced as soon as we get past those. And what Variant does is you can invoke it, yes, like this, which is like a script. That's good for during development. But what's even more rad is Variant. Let's see, build. So Variant, you can compile your variant. You can link it with other Go code. You can then distribute your code as a single cross-compiled binary for pretty much any platform that you can cross-compile for Go. Now, Mumoshu has his ecosystem of libraries, which are pretty rad. One is called Mod, one is called Shoal, one is called Depth, and he has used all of these other projects together in Variant, so it will automatically handle installation of the binary dependencies you depend on, versioning of those. It automatically supports updating the version pinning of that. So just like you can very easily update Go code just by running a single command, Go mod update or whatever it is, you can do that with his ecosystem of tools for Variant. I would love to show you guys an example of this. Unfortunately, what I want to show you is right now closed. Is not closed. Yeah, it's closed source, but will be open sourced. We're just working through some contract things around that, and it's going to be released. And then I can show you what this looks like. The end result is that we've been able to create a very simple DSL at Cloud Posse. Let me see if I can find an example of what our DSL. Yeah, I can't share the DSL right now. But the gist of it is that we're able to, in YAML, describe a workflow for how to apply a Terraform project very easily. But without showing the YAML, it just doesn't make sense. It's just hand waving. So, Sheldon, I promise I'll get back to you. The company that we're working with has promised to work with us to get this open source very shortly, hopefully in the next week or two, and then I can show you guys a precise example of what this stuff looks like. Does anybody have any general questions on Variant, on what it's doing? Any complaints? Observations?
Maybe one question. How easy is it to start using this? Like if you want to implement it within your infrastructure and how easy it is to?
Yeah, here's what I would do. I would the very first thing to do is just go here to releases. Under releases, he ships a binary release for every version, and you can just download this for your platform. Right now, it's just Linux and Darwin, but if you ping him, we can add Windows or something like that to it as well. After you do that, the first thing you're going to do is create a file just for playing around locally. I would just copy his example right here. And after you copy this example, let's see here. I could try and even do it on the call here, but I don't know if it's going to be the best live example since I haven't vetted it before here. But if you copy this into your code, like into a file locally, call it like, test.variant or something, then all you need to do is after you do that, run variant, run like my script -- help. And you'll automatically see all the arguments that you can pass to it. You'll automatically see the descriptions. And what you're doing is you're creating a very modern CLI experience. Now, I just feel really bad about this because this was totally not rehearsed, so I don't have any examples to show you. And I feel like this is just not doing the tool any justice, because the fact is there is no other tool out there like Variant that I could convince you guys is similar to this. It is like an amalgamation of Make with Ansible, with Go, with Terraform, with Helm, with HCL. Like it's in a category of its own, and that's why I'm struggling to explain it right now.
Hey, Eric, question for you on this. One, will you guys end up at some point replacing your cloud harness or build harness with this type of approach? And two, is it possible to leverage existing scripts to avoid, like, to get a quick start? Can we leverage, like in my case, some PowerShell if I've got the path, or bash scripts?
Totally. That's the objective with this. So here's so I guess let me take another step back. So part of the problem is that, okay, so developer A writes a quick shell script for initializing your Terraform state bucket, and developer B writes a shell script for running your deployments with Helm file and exporting your Kubernetes kubeconfig. Developer A, and one script is in PowerShell, the other one is in Bash, the other one is in Perl, the other one is in Ruby. The command line arguments of these scripts are always different, and the quality of them varies. All you want to do is expose some tooling to your organization for how to run these commands very nicely and cleanly. And the problem is that doing a CLI well is not easy, but what a good CLI looks like is very well understood today. I would argue that Helm is a very nice CLI interface. Like kubectl is a very nice CLI interface. Like Terraform is a moderately nice, somewhat inconsistent interface. Helm file is a nice one, and there's kind of these patterns that have evolved. But trying to implement those patterns in PowerShell, implement those patterns in Bash, you can do it, but it ends up being a monstrosity of Bash code that you don't want to maintain and look at. So here, why don't you keep writing your scripts? Why don't you keep using what you are efficient in doing? But then wrap all of that in a runner called Variant, and tie those together in workflows. So, a workflow for us might be this: if we want to initialize a new customer environment, the first thing we need to do is create a Bootstrap user, and we can't create the Bootstrap user with Terraform because we don't even have an IAM user yet. How do we create the IAM user for that? So it's a cold start problem. So the first thing we do is we call some AWS CLI command that creates some Bootstrap IAM user. Then the next thing we do is we call Terraform to create a state bucket using that new user we created. But we want to then import, so that Terraform code creates an S3 bucket, but now we need to tell Terraform to import its state into that bucket. So then we run some other Terraform commands. And what I'm describing to you is what is typically a WikiOps workflow. WikiOps being documented somewhere and you execute it once every 5 years. And it's probably out of date. But what I want to do is describe that as code. And that's a workflow. That's a pipeline that I'm describing. So that is what this tool does. You can, all it does in the end, Sheldon, you see this here? It's just calling commands. Because this is just a workflow runner. This is like having your own local Circle CI or your own local Travis or your own local Jenkins or something like that. And you give it the commands that it should run, but this is how you define a workflow. Variant itself takes care of supporting a well-designed CLI interface. So well-designed CLI interface supports parameters, it supports positional options, it supports subcommands. So subcommands is kind of like where you have mycli space Terraform space plan. So Terraform is a subcommand of mycli, and plan is a subcommand of Terraform. How do you organize that and create a CLI? And this is what Variant does. There's a couple other pretty amazing things that Variant does. So Variant is a built-in Slack bot. So with Variant, you can run it as a standalone daemon, connect it to a Slack channel, and now Variant is your company Slack bot, running commands on the back end. That's one use case for Variant.
Sold.
So yeah, check that out.
It's very promising. I know that there's two types that I've come across as I've tackled this problem. There's two types of main scripts. There's what I call functions that whatever you're using, and in my case, I use PowerShell. That basically you wrap up stuff that could be almost unit tested, but it's not meant necessarily to be like tied together with lots of integrations. And then you have the runners. And the like make is a great one. I use invoke build with PowerShell, but even though some of these can be cross-platform, there's a lot of dependencies. There's lots of uniqueness to that one platform, how it outputs standard errors to, say, a build engine. And all I want to do is ensure that I can communicate to a team a standard set of workflow and use the exact same workflow in a build that I can also run locally. And it sounds like this process is moving towards a better cross-platform option, that a build engine plus a developer can locally run. Love that.
Yeah, exactly. This is the thing, like we've been using make, obviously, and some arg1 or something, and make is very easy. And the difference between make and a bash script is make is also opinionated. Make has very few ways you can pass arguments. Make is environment driven. And Sheldon brought up earlier our build harness. So if you go to github.com/cloudposse build harness, we've exploited and pushed make to the limit of what make was ever intended to do. So in this case, I have this make file here, and I can run make test, and it's just going to print a blank. Go into the test. So here we have this. So make test, and it's just gonna print a blank line like that. And I can start making this look a little bit prettier by putting an @ here. So now it's not going to show the echo. Okay, and then we're going to have arg1 equals foobar, and now it's going to echo foobar. So this is kind of how we can have like like an associative array with named parameters that we pass to make and do something. And that works, but this is not a modern CLI interface. And once you have a lot of targets, it gets very unmanageable for using make, and then you're going to want to have like test Terratest or something, and then so we've been using slashes for namespacing our targets, and echo arg2, and this one depends on test, and we can define. Now I've created the basic workflow, like a pipeline here in make. So when we run test/Terratest, it's first going to run test, and then it's going to run Terratest. And so we run make test Terratest, and arg2 equals baz, and it echoes baz, and arg1 equals foo, and then we saw foo and then baz. And so you can do a lot with make, and you can get it to look pretty nice. One other nice thing in make is you can locally scope your environment variables like test :arg1 optionally is foo. So now if I don't specify arg1, it's still at foo. Nice. The problem is that what I would like my client to look like is I'd like to be able to do instead like my cli test Terratest environment foo. So this is a modern CLI interface. I'd like to be able to say my CLI test help, and I'd like to see all the options that are available to me under test. Or if I know I want to run Terratest, but I don't know how to do it, I want to run my CLI test Terratest help, right? And this is what's so hard to do if you're spreading your tool set across lots of scripting languages, across lots of tool chains, across Terraform, Helm file, Terratest, etc., whatever. And Variant is solving that problem, and I'll give you guys a better demo of what this looks like in action as soon as we have the right, as soon as we open source this on Cloud Posse in the next couple weeks here. All right, let's see. I got some text in the chat here. Andre, you shared some link earlier. Andre Nazarov, what was that about?
Yeah, the first one is part quiz, the UI for Kubernetes as well. So it's pretty nice. It's from IBM, and we've used that a lot. So it's kind of, sometimes it's slow as Lens, but it does its job. It's pretty nice tool.
Are you talking about the YouTube link you shared? That one shows a nice UI from somewhere, from IBM, you said?
No, it was just a link to a tool called KUI. It's KUI, so Kubernetes UI. And the second one was about Q, so a lot of started with the same letter.
Oh, sorry, I'm looking at the Zoom chat right now, so that's why.
All right, so I'm talking about Slack.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah, so just for everyone's sake, and I should probably say this in the office hours intro, is that we should focus around using the Slack channel for office hours and not the Zoom chat, because it's so hard to keep track of the conversation.
Yeah, and about my link to YouTube, somebody asked for recorded videos of your guys.
Oh, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. That was
Thank you. All right. Let me get back to my, where was it? The window I was in. There we go. So share screen and go back to sharing. I think it's this one. Yeah, cool. All right, we are almost out of time. We got 5 minutes left. I'm gonna go down to the bottom of office hours here and see what we should cover. I couldn't find the ECS thread about setting nvars, but outside of pulling them out programmatically. Okay. Yeah, it's Sheldon, like you said, it's like Go Releaser. Okay. Did I miss something? Any questions I can help answer? Other follow-up questions or things you want to bring up in the last few minutes here? open to anyone.
Well, I volunteer to be a beta tester for your variant framework. When you get there, I'm using something that's integrated into VS Code that absolutely love the development experience for, and I'd love to see what what options Variant 2 has as you get closer to release. So.
Yeah, so I mean, there's no like Variant 2. Well, so Variant 2 is using HCL under the hood, but I don't think there's a language server, for example, for Variant 2 yet. It's very early. My goal with talking about this now is to whet everyone's appetite with it, and then as soon as we start releasing this stuff, to start building community support around the Variant toolchain. I think it has enormous potential. Just like, we found Helmfile when Helmfile had like 35 stars or something, and now it has a couple thousand. So I really think that Variant 2 has that potential, and I'm hoping to see it grow. Oh, we got a noisy keyboard there.
Oh, sorry. That's me.
The mechanical keyboard.
If no one else is going, I have a quick question. I just heard about a case where an individual was not able to be hired on as a consultant because of the Uber Lyft decision in California. And I was wondering if there's any pass-through organizations that kind of do what, I don't know, consultancy groups do, and just on a pass-through basis, like an S Corp with liability.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not a lawyer, INAL, but the two workarounds I've seen is, one is, I forget, CBS works with one of these companies. Basically, that company hires you, and then CBS works with them directly, and that's like the pass-through kind of structure you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like similar to an MSP kind of managed services provider, or somebody that does staff aug. What we do though, like that, in your situation, did that person have their own LLC or S Corp?
I think they were prior to this, they were just independent contractor, 1099.
Yeah. I mean, I think what will reduce a lot of the liability, especially in this situation, is they create a LLC or S Corp around their work, and then the relationship is between two corporations.
Right. I think the amount of work was sort of below the threshold of creating an S Corp or an LLC.
Yeah. There's what's interesting. Yeah, this is just not really helpful for that, but what is it? Hello sign. Was it Hello sign? I think they're the ones that also made it. No, it's Stripe. Stripe made it. So Stripe has an API to programmatically create LLCs. I just thought that was interesting. So
that is interesting.
You can create an LLC per contract, per statement of work. Really lock down your liability.
That's within Stripe?
I think it's a Stripe company. Yeah, Stripe LLC API. Let's see. Stripe Atlas, it's called.
Okay. That's something to go forward with.
Yeah. Make it easy to create Delaware C corporations. But even, so it's interesting, behind the scenes Stripe, and I don't know how it works today, but somewhere I had seen some video, and Stripe, what they'd successfully achieved, especially in early versions, is behind the scenes, everyone still has a merchant account, but they'd made it feel as though it were API driven. But behind the scenes, there was somebody filling out forms and sending PDFs around.
That sounds cute. Thanks for that.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we're 1 hour on the dot here, so that about wraps things up for today. If you're new to this and you haven't yet signed up for office hours, get a weekly invitation. Go to cloudposse.com/office hours, and you can register there. If you haven't yet subscribed to our podcast, you can go to cloudposse.com/podcast and get that. If you like what you heard today and you'd like some time directly one-on-one with Cloud Posse, you can head over to cloudposse.com/quiz. Again, that's cloudposse.com/quiz, and you'll get to talk to me directly, and we can see if we're a fit for what we do here at Cloud Posse. Anyways, we will be posting a recording of this call to the Office Hours channel and following up with a link to your email. So tune into that or share it with your team if they weren't able to attend today. Thank you all for sharing your questions and answers. We always learn so much from these sessions. Talk to you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Yep.